Welcome to the Legal Innovation Forum podcast series, Leading at the Intersection of Business, Innovation, and Law. I'm Lucy Saddleton, Managing Editor at the Legal Innovation Forum. Today's episode features a timely discussion on the impact of artificial intelligence on the energy sector. As AI transforms energy operations, this panel discussion examines the core challenges, risks, and opportunities arising for this highly regulated sector as a result. I hope you enjoy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. Welcome to the Legal Innovation Forum's 2026 webinar series. I'm Andrew Bowyer. I am the founder of the Legal Innovation Forum, and we put on programs, virtual and live, all over North America, focused on the intersection of business and law and the business of law. And today's session is focused on a very interesting sector, the energy sector, and how AI is impacting the sector itself, the opportunities that it's creating, the tail risks that it's creating, and the role of lawyers in advising leaders on navigating the complexity of the sector. So I want to thank our partner for today's program, Exterro, and we have Bryant Bell, who's with them as one of our panelists. And before we get going, I just want to let the audience know we will have open questions and Q&A throughout the session, so feel free to ask in either the chat or the Q&A function, which I'm sure all of you are comfortable with on Zoom, and we'll go from there. So before we begin, we're just waiting for one more panelist, Melissa Stoster-Young, to join us, but she will momentarily. So I'll have the other panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start with Marcia Hook.
Hello, my name is Marcia Hook. I'm the head of the U.S. Energy Regulatory and Markets practice at Clifford Chance. My practice is pretty broad, so I focus on regulatory issues across the energy sector, including advising on FERC and DOE requirements, but I also do commercial energy agreements in basically all of the energy commodity spaces and advise on litigation and enforcement issues. So look forward to having a fun chat today.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Marcia. Leslie.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Leslie Lee. I'm the Director of Litigation and Employment Law at TC Energy, which is a Canadian-based natural gas pipeline and power company. And in my role, I oversee and manage all litigation matters arising in Canada and the US, and have a team of lawyers based out of Calgary and Houston that assists on that.
All right. Thanks very much, Leslie. And Bryant.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name's Bryant Bell, and I am the lead product marketer for eDiscovery and AI at Exterro. And I have been involved in governance, risk, and compliance, cybersecurity, and eDiscovery in one way or another for almost 30 years now, and have worked not only for some energy companies as well as software vendors.
All right. Excellent. Well, and then we do have Melissa Stoster-Young, who's a partner at McMillan Calgary, who we're just getting online. So when she does join up, we'll hear from her about her bio. But let's get going in terms of the program today. So firstly, this is CLE accredited. And so I'm going to be saying 4 keywords throughout the session. The first keyword is regulation. So that's regulation for folks. Take note, and I'll repeat them throughout. But just to make sure people stick around for their CLE credits, we'll be naming those words throughout. So we're going to be talking about a number of different themes today. First of all, we're going to be talking about how AI is transforming energy operations on the ground and what that looks like in terms of opportunities. Then we're going to be focusing on the spin-off legal, regulatory, and commercial risks that are created by the AI revolution. Then we're going to talk about how legal departments and law firms focused on or practice areas focused on the energy sector using AI, and then talking about a closing topic, which is a little bit more general, but an important one, no matter which sector you're focused on. And if you're a lawyer, is balancing efficiency with ethical and professional obligations. So let's start first with what we're seeing on the ground in terms of AI transforming the energy sector itself. Marcia, do you have any comments on the places where you see AI being implemented in the sector, and what do you find sort of most interesting about that?
Certainly. So we certainly see a lot of use of AI in the power markets in particular. There are so many opportunities to deploy AI to optimize various resources, whether they're batteries, demand side resources. We've always been in a very data-driven, data-intensive industry, and AI allows companies to really fully capitalize, or I guess maybe even further optimize those opportunities to employ data in thinking about how to better capture arbitrage opportunities, identify resources that may not be fully performing the way that they could be. And that's something that we're seeing pretty much across the board in the power space. And the interesting thing, though, about AI is it's not just a tool in the energy sector, it's also driving demand, right? So, and that demand is in itself shaping the energy industry and investment decisions. So, of course, everybody is talking about speed to power. It is this huge race to get enough generation, enough power online to meet data center demand. And we're increasingly seeing transmission constraints that are preventing data centers from getting online in historical markets like Virginia, which was previously a huge, we're one of the leaders in data centers. And so that speed to power is changing investment decisions and how the market, how generation is being structured. So seeing a lot more behind the meter generation, co-located generation, merchant generation becoming very attractive again, these gas-fired facilities that people may have previously thought had seen their heydays, and then hyperscalers that are willing to pay significant premiums for reliable power. And then AI is really changing grid planning, right? Because historically, utilities planned around things like population growth, which is pretty slow and predictable, weather, industrial development. But now we're seeing these utilities having to plan around 500 megawatt, 1 gigawatt, or even bigger campuses and much more uncertain load forecasts, because if a data center that's 500 megawatts is suddenly in your queue and then it decides to not proceed to construction, it is a material impact on the load forecast. So all of these are shaping, all of these aspects of AI are shaping the industry, while we're all using it at the same time to increase operations in the space as well.
Very interesting. And also it's becoming a bit of a political hot potato, this generation piece too.
Yes, it is. I think there's a pretty interestingly uniform view around the need to get generation onto the grid quickly, and at least the folks that I'm talking to seem to be pretty aligned around the all of the above approach right now, given the load forecasts, primarily driven by data centers, which are then in turn driven by AI needs. We're seeing significant alignment around we should just be focusing on getting as much power onto the grid as quickly as possible, or in the case of co-located generation, making sure that it gets built so that there can be a bridge to interconnection.
Right. Okay. And where do you find yourself spending most of your time advising the companies that you do on this whole kind of picture here, right? Is it more on the power generation side, or is it more on how they're using AI themselves in their own organizations, or a bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, but I would say it does tend to weigh more in favor of meeting the demand. We're seeing all sorts of creative things on the company side of using AI to maximize opportunities, but in terms of actual work on a day-to-day basis, these structures that we're seeing, the innovations that are being adopted to create bridges to interconnection or the meet the speed to power, they have such complicated regulatory implications in terms of thinking about how do you build a co-located generator in a way that complies with state power sale restrictions and federal regulations with respect to power sales. And that all has to be woven into the structure of the supply arrangements, including the contracts. And so it's funny because we're supposed to be in a deregulatory climate, and yet I feel I have more job security than ever because all of this innovation, when you are in such a highly regulated space like energy, it has to be done in a way that still complies with these existing regimes, right? So it is a very interesting time to be in my space.
Yeah. And I remember last year too, right, because of at the event we did in Houston at Clifford Chance and you spoke at was that sorry, I just have a Slack call coming here. So sorry. So planning around that, right? Because you have different administrations coming in, different regulatory regimes coming in. How do you balance that? How do you forecast for the future when you're advising your clients? Because you have to have a fairly flexible approach.
That's a great question. I will say that a lot of the regulatory regimes that present the greatest challenges are at the state level. And so it's really we always have to worry about future proofing our contracts. And so change in law provisions and things like that are always top of mind. And in this space, of course, we see action at the federal level, which we're tracking things like what's happening at FERC with respect to large load interconnections. But really the most impactful regulations are at the state level. And there actually we're seeing a lot of change, but it's not driven by the federal political level. It's driven by essentially pushback on actual data center construction. And so there we just have to be we have to track, which we use AI to help track all of these developments. And then two is making sure that we draft our contracts in a way that can survive evolution of the regulatory regime.
All right. Excellent. Well, that's a really good start, Marcia. So thank you. Melissa, welcome. Let's just check that your mic is working. I think. Okay, we got you. So Melissa, just tell us briefly about who you are, and then I'm going to ask you the next question. So.
Sure. I'm Melissa Stoster-Young, and I'm a partner at McMillan in
We're just getting an echo from you, Melissa.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can fix that.
Yeah, I think.
Just give me a moment.
No problem. Okay, try again. Let's see. Okay, try again, Melissa. We can hear you now.
Is that better?
Much better, yeah. Okay, you're good. So tell us about yourself.
My apologies.
No problem.
Yes, I'm Melissa Stoster-Young, and I'm a partner at McMillan in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I specialize in energy regulatory and major projects, and I lead our energy and major projects team nationally. And I have spent about 19, 20 years in-house prior to returning to private practice in various roles with different energy companies across the whole value chain.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us, Melissa. So, Marcia was sort of telling us about this sort of push-pull between the demand for power driven by AI, balanced with AI being implemented in the energy sector itself. Obviously, in the Canadian context, it's a little bit different. We have got a new government. Well, they're not so new anymore. They're a bit more than 14 months old now, I believe. But infrastructure is at the top of the to-do list, which has quite a few spin-off implications as well. So it remains to be seen. But in terms of what you see going on in the Canadian energy sector, when it comes to this power generation plus the use of AI in the sector, what are the key things that your clients are focused on, and what are you advising them on right now?
So there's definitely a big push for power generation, like gas to power for AI data centers, especially in Alberta. So Marcia had already talked about that as well in the US. But we're also seeing our clients use AI in their operations, both from a safety perspective. There's a number of different tools out there that are actually collaborative across different companies, but yet still provide for each company to maintain confidentiality of their own information. And as we know, energy, the focus is always on safety first. We're also seeing it in the integrity space. So in pipelines and transmission lines, more pipelines right now, the use of AI powered technology to improve the quality of crack detection, so there isn't a leak, and it decreases costs associated with having to go in and dig out to verify whether there's in fact cracks in the line. There are some interesting tools around marketing and trading of energy that have been developed that actually were started in the auto industry, but which have moved into the energy space and are being used actually in Australia. Those are the main things that I've seen with clients in terms of use of AI in operations. And then in terms of issues that we're seeing coming to us from clients, just a lot of questions around confidentiality and privilege with respect to internal stakeholders using AI in a way that could cause some risks associated with loss of confidentiality and legal privilege.
Okay, excellent. And we'll get into that a little bit more. Lots more questions about the Canadian context too, but thanks for joining, Melissa. And glad we have all the technical stuff sorted out. So,
Yes.
Leslie, tell us at your perspective at TC Energy in terms of how integration of AI into the firm is coming along. Broader questions about producing power to power the AI revolution. And regulation and litigation risk. A lot of different topics there, but take your pick.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you for having me. I think what I can say is obviously we're seeing the same, thing in terms of data centers and, getting natural gas to power data centers. So that's a big push in the industry just generally right now. We also are very focused on responsible adoption of AI in our day-to-day business, and have a lot of people looking at different ways to do that. Including, some of the things that Melissa mentioned around, pipeline integrity, what tools are out there to help enhance our processes there. We've had partnerships with Amazon to develop some, use of generative AI in document management and developing technical memos, that kind of thing. So we're really looking at everything. But obviously, one of the big challenges is this it's just such a rapidly developing space for everybody, both in terms of the data center growth and demand that is placing on the energy industry, but also, the various tools that are coming out and how rapidly the tools are evolving as well. So figuring out, the right strategy to be focused and disciplined in how you adopt AI in your day-to-day operations is one of the big things that we're focused on, so that you're achieving real value out of your use of AI. I would also say, echoing some of Marcia's comments, like the regulatory frameworks are very much in their infancy. So we're really going back in terms of, legal advice to first principles around regulatory compliance and protecting, contractual breach of contract if you've got confidentiality issues, that kind of thing, because the regulatory framework around AI is still quite limited and just varies across the board. So we operate in 3 jurisdictions: Canada, the US, and Mexico. The laws are, different at the state, federal level in each jurisdiction. So piecing that together is a challenge as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Leslie. Bryant, so you obviously get a bit of a bird's eye view of what's going on in the sector. Tell us first, from Exterro's perspective, where is Exterro's focus on helping practitioners in the energy sector on the legal side of things achieve results, so folks understand what you do? And then if you could give us some observations of what you see rolling out in terms of opportunities and challenges in this new context that we're seeing in the AI era.
Yeah, Andrew, that's a really good question, and I'll try to keep it focused on adoption or implementation of AI, especially with our energy clients that we've talked to. Since we're mostly talking to the legal departments at the energy companies, a lot of things they're concerned about is potential liability of adopting AI. For example, like Marcia talked about, the speed that we need to get that energy out. Well, they're using AI really on the front end. How's the maintenance? How are they able to use AI to adjust demand and situations such as that? And what a lot of the GCs are worried about is that, can I rely on AI to actually give me the correct data? But then when we talk to them as well, it's, it should never be let AI just do everything. Even though you can connect AI to your operational technology or your telemetry across your pipelines, your wells, and maintenance points. Is it giving you accurate data? And if it doesn't, what type of liability does that open up, to you? And that could have litigation or regulatory consequences. And so we really talk to them about, how are you using AI? Where is it being implemented? And a lot of the GCs, are not so much. They're worried about the potential, right? What could happen. They need to protect the risk of their company. So they're looking at, okay, great, AI is fabulous to help operational efficiency, but when you implement that, where should AI stop and where should human judgment, have that safety gap? And that's a procedural and lots of times internal compliance operation for the company to look at. But our recommendation is always, AI is great. It can really speed things up for you and provide greater detail and can be more precise. But you also need to have human judgment in that loop as well. So whether you're looking at operational efficiency, faster field service and maintenance as well, all of those places where you're implementing AI, have great advantages, but also have potential risks as well. And those are things that I'm sure a lot of a lot of the people on the panel with me here have run across. So, but when we talk to our customers, that's what they're interested in, and they're looking for help to manage that data, the data sources, but then also if something potentially happens, then they also want to use AI to get to the root of uh, of that issue, that case, or that matter as quickly as possible.
All right. Well, thanks. Thank you thanks, Brian. So Marcia, I want to move on to our second section, which is risk, which is again a very broad category. So legal, regulatory, and commercial risks. And we in our discussion, it was before here we had a very broad discussion. So we have a lot of different topics and areas we can jump into. But if you were to outline the top 2 or 3 risks that you are advising your clients on in the sector, what would those be, and why?
That's a really great question. And I think, Bryant and Leslie already started to touch on this. And it's the challenge of how much do you rely on AI? And I see that in 2 contexts, both legal and operational, right? And in the legal function within any client, there's so many efficiencies that could be gained by using AI. And yet, basically every day in the trade press, you see some type of embarrassing story of a lawyer that relied on a hallucinated case or, miscitation. Maybe it stretches the case too far. And so there's a real challenge of what happens for the legal function if you try and incorporate this tool, which has this great promise of unleashing efficiencies, and yet, if not supervised properly, could actually subject you to, if you're in the litigation context, penalties and sanctions from the court and things like that. And on the operational side, as Brian and Leslie had already alluded to, the question becomes how much can you rely on AI, which again, we all know has limitations in this operational context when, of course, yes, if something happens from a regulatory liability perspective, the question is how much. You can't really say, well, the AI told me this was right. It doesn't work any better on the operational side than it works for the lawyers. And it's not, but for the way I see it is very practical. It's not even just a concern about regulatory liability. It's that our clients operate real assets that, deliver power to people's homes, that pipelines need to maintain integrity so that they don't have catastrophic events, which of course can also affect transmission and power infrastructure as well. And so these have real life impacts on the operational side if the data is incorrect, right? And so what I would say is generally some people are rushing to use AI, and they just tell people their folks to just use AI, right? You hear about companies that are saying, if you're not using AI, you're falling behind to their employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a significant aspect of what's going to differentiate companies that deploy AI successfully from those that are potentially walking into additional opportunities for liability is governance and process, right? There has to be intentionality on the front end as to how you have to teach people how to use AI responsibly. And that involves creating a framework for them to understand how to use it and at what point we need to reintroduce the human. At what point does there need to be verification, and how often, and what's the process for that? And depending on whether it's a legal function within the company or the operational, those might have different answers, right? But there needs to be process and governance put in place in order to make sure that AI is used in a way that doesn't just expose you to opportunities for additional liability.
Yeah. Okay. We'll build on that. Melissa, your colleague Jessica sent around some notes to the group, which were very well researched about basically all the topics we're talking about on this panel. But what struck me in that is the complexity and the intensity of AI use in some of these major projects when you read about them. And also the risks, the spin-off risks if something goes wrong. It seems like that's an inevitability perhaps in some regards, and hard to predict when that may or may not happen. But building on that, what are the kind of in this AI era, Melissa, what are you advising your clients on? What are the kind of top 2 risks that you're seeing and saying, look, you need to be paying attention to? And feel free to build on what Marcia said, but if you may have some other ones, feel free.
Sure. Well, first of all, I agree with everything that Marcia said. And one thing I would say is that, like, within an organization, as you move up the chain of enterprise risk management, AI has a place all the way up. But as you get closer to, the likelihood and consequence being more critical, I think it's essential that you have the human component not getting completely replaced with AI. At the lower level, it could be it's inconsequential potentially to be using AI for certain types of functions, and it can create a lot more efficiencies. So, if you back up and you think about any type of company, in the energy space, they typically use a lot of service providers, a lot of technology that is not their own. And when you're putting those contracts together, you allocate risk, and it's just the traditional, this party's liable for that, and this party indemnifies that party for that, typically the vendor. But now you've got vendors, probably not the originators of the AI power behind whatever the tool is, for example. There's probably some sort of collaboration in the background there. So vendors are not going to want to take on any liability for performance or failures. And that means that the customer, the operator, is absorbing that. But it's unlikely at this point in time that there's actually insurance coverage for these potential operational failures. So that's just something to be mindful of. It doesn't mean that it's not AI powered technology is not the right thing to do in industry. It just means that you're no longer guaranteed to be operating within the traditional legal allocation of risk space that we've been used to for a long time. The other thing would be, and this is not huge, but to the extent that there's intellectual property associated with the inputs, like the data points, this is a very gray area in terms of who would own that intellectual property, and it's not likely to be registered IP. It's more likely trade secret. So that's something to also be mindful of. We're talking about like reservoir technologies, predictive technologies, things like that can morph into the space where operators, and I'm thinking more on the E&P side, want to protect that information. So that's something to also be mindful of.
All right.
And that's the operational side. In terms of like the legal risks, there isn't a lot of law that's been developed in Canada yet. And I echo what Marcia said about regulatory compliance. Even if you've used AI, you still are responsible for regulatory compliance. At this point in time, there's nothing in any of our regs that specifically prohibits the use of AI or mandates the use of AI. In Ontario, the Ontario Energy Board does require disclosure of use of AI in filings. So that's new. And at the federal level, we do have a bill that has been introduced on cybersecurity for critical infrastructure, which would include things like pipelines and transmission lines. From the energy sector's perspective, there's a focus on critical infrastructure and cybersecurity associated with that.
An add-on question to that, Melissa. So, obviously you have an evolving regulatory environment. Your clients are probably coming to you for how do we interpret this, cyber and critical infrastructure regulation that's rolling out, and you don't know how long that will take or what form it will take. And then also, as you know, in Canada, much the same as the US, you have multiple provinces to contend with. And sometimes provinces who aren't in agreement about what the energy strategy the province should be. Any advice on that, or thoughts you want to share about how you can inform your clients on taking a flexible yet protective and defensive approach?
Yeah, I mean, from a regulatory perspective, I would just say, again, as you move up the enterprise risk management matrix for regulatory compliance issues, you just need to be sure that you've got a human component involved. So, AI can improve the quality of data. It can improve the speed with which we're aggregating and collecting data. But it can't by itself meet compliance standards. So I'm not sure that at this stage we're really reducing the amount of human oversight. I just think we're working in a different way right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. So the second term for the CLE credits is governance. That's governance, and the first one was regulation. So those claiming CLE credits, you've got 2 of 4 now. So Leslie, in your perspective, when you're looking at operational risk, downstream litigation risk, and perhaps legal risk as well, what are the kind of key themes and areas that you're focusing on that you could share with the audience?
I mean, we're thinking about lots of things, but very similar to what Marcia and Melissa have already talked about. Having a robust AI policy that has that human in the loop requirement and provides clear guidance to our employees on the appropriate use of AI and the guidelines around that, and then also having training that people have access to, so that they can, because everybody's on a steep learning curve here, but just making sure we've got a robust policy that's reinforced by robust training. I think we're also in the kind of legal risk area, we're having a good contracting strategy, similar to what kind of Melissa's also alluded to, is making sure we're dealing with issues like confidentiality, liability, that kind of thing, both in terms of our agreements with AI vendors that are licensing tools or selling us their AI software, making sure we have the right contract terms with them to protect ourselves and address any confidentiality, IP related risks, but also in our agreements with our other vendors that addresses confidentiality, making sure we're understanding to how they are using AI when they're performing services for us. So thinking about those aspects of it as well. I think Melissa and Marcia have done a pretty comprehensive job of talking about the risks. And I think everybody is very live to the human in the loop risk. You can't just, push a button on a computer and let it do the work. But we're also trying to raise the profile of making sure you're not putting confidential information into open source AI, and making sure that our vendors are aware of that risk as well. So, there's other things to be thinking about other than just the human in the loop hallucination risk.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Bryant, which area do you want to jump into? I know data risk is probably something that you're spending a lot of your time focused on. You're helping your clients, foresee potential pitfalls down the line and advising them early before things sort of emerge. What would you tell the audience of the big risks that you're seeing in your practice?
Well, to get back to the CLE governance, and I like to use an analogy. It's kind of fun to think about, but I call it the skate park analogy. And AI is kind of like, you know, you have a bunch of people doing a bunch of different things. You have, there's not only the AI that is adopted and approved by your company, but you have dark AI, just like we used to have dark IT, right? People are going to use the tools that they can use to get their job done as quickly as possible, and AI fits that bill amazingly, right? So if you think about this, back before skate parks were built, skaters were all over the city, right? Figuring out where they could skate, what they could do, what they wanted to do, when. But then, to contain that, you built skate parks, right? And the skate parks had a nice confined area. They had what they needed to do and to play. Those are the confines that we put, with our own internal compliances, but also pulling in the developing regulations around AI. And those regulations around AI are changing almost daily, depending on the case law that's coming down, and we see quite a bit of it for our clients. But besides just the skate park and where they can skate, more of that governance is like, you got to wear the helmet, you got to put the pads on, you're trained on how to do it well. Um, and that's really, for AI, that's kind of a governance analogy where you need to pull all these people in, still let them use those tools, give them the proper training and push them forward. Um, and I'm glad to see that, human in the loop is on top of mind, because it really is, one of the things that we always say is that, hey, look, AI can help your accuracy. AI can help you find information that you might not have found before. Um, but what AI and Gen AI and agentic AI don't do is they do not replace the judgment of your legal team. The judgment of your legal team is the most important thing, but how quickly you can get to those judgments and use your knowledge and use your training to come up with the decisions and the strategies that you need. That's what's most important. That's a huge advantage of AI and the Gen AI tools for the legal departments. And those are the things that we talk about. We help our customers say, what are you implementing? How are you implementing it? Do you have your skate park and your rules and regulation for that skate park in place, right? But besides that, knowing how it's going to help you, um, you know, the thing we're seeing too is that not only is AI helping um, legal departments, AI is helping people on the outside launch more complaints and potential litigation against our clients as well. Um, they're AI it's a double-edged sword, right? And so volume is going up. The complexity of where that data is for potential evidence or for responding to a request, where that data lives, and how do you find it and how do you produce it, correctly, so that you don't release, privileged or PII. And the volume of that and the diversity is increasing, but Gen AI can definitely help with that. But still, the judgment's never going to go away. Um, and really, what we need to focus on is that, you know, Gen AI definitely can help. And from our point of view, it's it's not going to replace the people that actually are trained to manage the overall risk for a company.
Thank you, Brian. So I want to just talk a little bit more about this governance piece, because I think that would be there'd be some interesting insights for the audience to learn from. So, Brian, I like your skate park analogy. It reminds me of my teenage years. Looking for a skate park, but never a great skateboarder, but I tried. But this is what you're talking about with skate parks is really the imperative for organizations to be innovative. And there's this pressure adopt AI, to be competitive, to be on the cutting edge, balanced with this need to make sure that rules, governance, and this innovation is effectively sandboxed or skate parked,
Skate
to
park.
use a different term. So I don't know if maybe starting with Marcia or Melissa, if you want to comment on that in terms of how folks can think about how do you have a sort of a firm yet flexible governance strategy around this to enable innovation with these checks and balances in place, in an environment that's rapidly evolving and has so many externalities of risks that could really have dramatic changes at any time. It must be a very interesting thing to intellectually to have to do. But if you have any advice for the audience, Marcia, maybe we could hear from you first.
Certainly. So I think when we think about how to create policies around AI, it's important to understand and be driven by what is AI good at right now and what is AI bad at. And maybe someday it'll be better at it, but it's still really bad at it. And so in the category of things that it's good at summarizing facts when it's fed documents and aggregating and reviewing a lot of documents and synthesizing it into information. And in that context, it makes it in reviewing first drafts or polishing language, right? Things like that. What it is bad at is coming up with analysis from scratch, like a lawyer can, right? So critical thinking, doing complex legal reasoning that requires multiple steps that are not necessarily obvious to anyone except for a lawyer who's been practicing for a while. And so when I think about just looking at legal functionalities and from a very practical perspective, so what are the things that if I'm coming up with an in-house policy of where I can use AI and rely on it a little bit more confidently, thinking about, for example, litigation, what we think AI is very good at and have found over and over it is very good at is, for example, reviewing documents that are in, let's say, relativity and helping create deposition outlines or witness prep outlines, refining and supplementing expert testimony, coming up with supporting facts for a brief or a pleading, right? And in that case, the safeguard is that you're having it point you back to documents in the data set, right? But it can review a ton of information, pull it, and instead of some poor junior associate spending tens and tens of hours reviewing tens of thousands of documents or whatever, or having gone through it, maybe you didn't see it in your initial review of the documents in relativity because it didn't hit key search terms, right? So things like that. And it's the safeguard is that you have a point back to documents you have, and that is the safeguard. And it's very clear how to create that process. It's something AI is good at. Same thing, using that same logic. If you're on the transactional side, if we're using it for due diligence, we've used it here at Clifford Chance. We've loaded hundreds of contracts into a controlled site where our AI has access, and we can have it do things like review all the contracts for change of control analysis, review for what is the assignment, does it cover change of control, things like that. And then also, if you give it additional training, it can learn to do things like red flags, right? Those are contexts where it's very good at. What I wouldn't ever have it do is start from scratch. And I think putting those guardrails in your process, that's how the process has to be created. And it depends on what your organization is using it for, right? But it's framed by the understanding and driven by what is AI good at, what is AI bad at, and we should try and minimize the situations we're using it for, things like drafting from scratch legal analyses. And that is where, as Bryant said, that's where the humans come in. And so that's kind of what I use as a driver.
Yeah, Marcia said something funny, like draft from scratch. We actually had a customer that was using a Gen AI tool that was supposedly trained well, but in their documents they had the words Harry and Potter not related and in different documents. And when it drafted from, origin to beginning, all of a sudden Harry Potter the Wizard showed up in their drafts. And it was just because there had been some corruption in how the Gen AI was trained, and it recognized that Harry Potter was something that was out there, and so it put in Harry Potter the Wizard is somebody a person that you should be looking at. So it's Gen AI is not infallible, but what Marcia says is absolutely true. It shouldn't be to create from the beginning to the end at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's also like the more things change, the more things stay the same. Whether you're drafting a brief yourself and not using AI tools, I mean, would you ever hand that brief over without proofreading it or having an associate look at it? I don't think you would. And if you use AI, you know, it's your professional responsibility to make sure that you review that and give it a critical review before you pass it on. So no matter what tools you're using, it's still, how we believe it's still an obligation that you need to check your own work, and you probably, you go through and review it and probably have somebody else review it before you submit it. And I mean, that's just the way we should all work, whether it's AI or not. But there's a lot of people that, you know, are using AI and they're taking shortcuts, and that's where you're seeing some of these funny cases that are happening.
Thanks, Brian. The third word is diligence. So for CLE, diligence, and then the other two words were governance and regulation. Melissa, anything to build on this governance piece? How it applies to your practice or
Yes.
operationally too? Is it open?
Sure. So at McMillan, we're a national firm, and we're an early adopter of a particular legal AI platform, and so we've taken a top-down approach, and it's a toolkit based approach. It is a people project, not a technology project. But having said that, most of our lawyers use legal AI every day. I use it every day. And I agree with everything that Marcia said in terms of what it's good at. I also agree with what she said around what it's not good at. But I can say with certainty myself that whenever you're asking it to do something that involves decision making or evaluation, it is not good at it at all. In fact, last night I was drafting a gas purchase agreement, gas supply contract, and I asked it to review the liability clause. It didn't have an indemnity. I asked it to put one in. I asked it to combine them. It got completely confused and messed the whole thing up. So that's a really good example of something that it cannot do. And if you don't have the experience and judgment that's been developed over years of practice to recognize that, you could be turning over a work product to your client that doesn't meet their needs. So, I think anything that's involves decision making or evaluation is an area that you need to be mindful of. We have been developing specific toolkits based on practice areas. So as that continues to develop, I think there will be toolkits for specific practices where we have where it can do a better job of certain types of things. So we've got, and I'm sure everybody has this, specific prompts and workflows and playbooks and things like that can be very, very helpful in specific practice areas. But yeah, I mean, essentially governance, law firms are the training ground of juniors who then often go on to become in-house lawyers. And it's essential that the senior lawyers make sure that the junior lawyers are developing that judgment. So it's absolutely required that anytime a junior is doing any work that they sit down with a senior lawyer and review it. And the senior lawyer's obligation is to ask them questions about how they made decisions around the work that they did so that they actually understand the fundamentals around it.
Thank you, Melissa. Leslie, you obviously are managing group in a legal department and also working with external counsel a lot and probably other technology vendors and service providers. What's your take on this?
A lot of my take has already been said, so I don't want to be too repetitive. But I think absolutely you need to be reviewing the work that AI is generating. But I'm also trying to lead my team in being open to AI, recognizing that learning how to use it effectively is in and of itself learning a new skill that we haven't, even just how to draft a prompt effectively, and how to recognize whether, where maybe things are kind of going sideways. This is a skill set that lawyers of all vintage are having to develop at the same time. And, I've said to my team, like, I'm too young to retire, so I'm going to have to learn how to do this. There's just no alternative, but it can be very helpful. And I was just talking to a lawyer this morning about something I'd used AI for last night. And I said, one of the advantages is AI took care of preparing the slide deck for me. So then I was able to, instead of focusing on, whether I had like the font size right and how to design the slide and all the rest of it, I was focused on the content of the slide and what it was actually saying. So, having that open mind that this isn't, this isn't going to take your job. It's not going to, but it's also not going to do your job for you. And you're going to have to proactively learn how to use it effectively in your practice day to day. Because I think there's a lot of value that it brings to the table. For sure.
Yeah. And when you're working with external counsel, are you noticing anything about them adopting AI or using AI or,
I'm noticing that there's varying levels of adoption. And so we're working hard with our external counsel to communicate, like, you've got to figure this out, and you've got to figure it out in a way that helps us bring down our outside legal costs, which not a message they love, but necessarily. But we've got
to telling them to reduce their billable hours. What?
But that's what our clients want to see, right? Like, if you've got all these tools, why aren't our costs coming down? And so really working with our external counsel to figure out the best uses and where you can actually save money. But again, we're in a kind of this unique space where, from our perspective, external counsel is still figuring it out. So you have the potential for costs to go up possibly in the near term as they figure out these ways to use it. So trying to mitigate that risk, not do too much at once, figure out, like, have, in some of our files, do run sort of test cases. Well, what if we do this with AI? Did that work out? And then roll that out to more cases, as opposed to trying to do everything all at once. And then, it's hard to tell where you're actually getting value out of the tools. But, we work with a lot of different firms in, 2 different countries, and varying levels of adoption, but everybody's very interested. And I think everybody's accepted that this is like the new way of, kind of when we moved from card catalogs at the library to online, research tools like Lexis and Westlaw. Like, this is just how legal work is going to be done in the future. So embracing that.
Thanks, Leslie. Just as a final quote, do any of our external counsel on this call have, rejoinder in terms of how they're trying to improve the efficiency or the service offering to the client side with AI?
I can speak to that. Yes, we do disclose that we use AI. Obviously, we need consent from our clients to do so, but we do think there will be efficiencies, and depending on what the types of tasks that are required, we are prepared to work together to evaluate at the end of a mandate their perception and our perception of where we may have saved for them.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say we definitely use it. And I actually see one of the webinar questions was, does Marcia use AI as part of her practice? Which feels very specific to me, but I do use AI as part of my practice, both the billable and non-billable parts, right? So in this, for other folks who are outside counsel, that when you're a partner in a law firm, there's a lot of non-billable tasks. I use AI a lot for things like helping put together first draft of a fee estimate, things like that based on information I've given it. And those are things where it can't lie to me, right? It can't lie to me if I'm drafting assumptions, things like that. I use it. And then in my actual practice, I use it for the things that I know that it can do, where I can check. And I also tell my team, all my associates to use it as well. And I'm teaching them how to use it responsibly. So that's just become an additional part of what I'm supposed to teach my associates, right? As this is very much an apprenticeship type space. And in that context, what I would say is there's all of this worrying about junior lawyers, not having jobs in the future, or, the concern that we won't have enough work, billable hours to do. I don't think, first of all, that most of my team or any of us really want to be doing the type of work that can currently be replaced by AI, or at least certainly, to the extent there are efficiencies, I'm very happy to find them and pass them on to our clients. And because it unlocks the ability to focus on higher level work that I think our clients really want, they do pay us for, right? And so I don't see that as a concern. And for my associates, my goal is, if, 0 is you just started out of law school and you really didn't get any practical training in law school, as most of us didn't, and 10 is a fully functioning, autonomous partner lawyer. I want my associates to get from 0 to 5 faster, and AI allows them to do that because we're using it in a way that essentially accelerates them, whether it's me creating checklists, resources, and things that I can create faster because I have AI and I use it for that. So for me, I think it's our job as outside counsel to figure out how to use AI, and that it makes our teams able to do much better, more sophisticated work for our clients. And so I know there's a lot of concern and hand-wringing about what AI is going to do to lawyers and junior lawyers, but to me, I'm optimistic still about us having value even in the AI future.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew, Marcia brings up a really important part, is that, being able to focus on that higher value work is really what the clients are looking for their outside counsel. And, we've been working with some law firms that are trying to be innovative when they look at the billable hour, and using AI both ways. One, using AI to analyze their own business, to find the matters that, are like matters for them, and see that, oh, hey, look, we have this whole set of matters that usually takes about the same amount of time and effort. And they're looking at ways to, instead of doing billable hour, charging by the matter if it falls into those confines that they've analyzed, and they know, hey, we know that we're going to be able to do it really good work for you in this time frame, so that's what we're going to charge you. And I think that's a trend that's it's starting to grow, and it's one of the trends that I think AI is helping law firms figure out. Okay, yeah, there's more complex matters and cases that aren't going to fit into those confines, but for some of these other ones, we know exactly, thanks to AI, because we can analyze every aspect about it, we know what it's going to take. So this is this is basically the fee for that matter. So, and that's, when I was at Legal Week, that was something we talked to a lot of outside counsel firms about. It was good conversations.
All right. Thank you, Brian. So the final word is compliance. And that's following regulation, governance, diligence, and compliance for those accounting for CLE. We scratched the surface. I think we had quite a few different directions we could continue to go in this conversation, so we'll have to have you all back. Thanks, Marcia, Melissa, Leslie, and Bryant for participating as panelists on today's webinar. Appreciate it. Thank you to Exterro for supporting this webinar. We're hoping to do some more on this topic and some more content rolling out the rest of the year. And thank you to the audience for taking your time to listen in today. And we appreciate your feedback. Let us know other topics you'd like to hear about, ways we could improve. Always happy to hear on the exit survey once you leave the webinar what you thought. We'll be doing some more webinars over the summer, so stay tuned. And I hope everybody has a good rest of their day. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Leslie, Marcia, and Melissa as well. It was a pleasure.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening, and please stay tuned for the next episode.